Her aunt gave her away instead of her own daughter. The reasoning was simple. The girl was ordinary. No wolf, no gift, nothing a powerful alpha would want. What Mildred never suspected was that her niece had been hiding the truth for 23 years. She was a powerful Luna. The moment she married the cold, reclusive alpha of the deep forest, she stopped pretending. Until another alpha found out and decided he wanted her for himself. Welcome to our channel. Tell us where you're listening from. She had spent her entire life pretending to be nothing. Not because she was, but because being something in that house meant being taken. Her aunt had made that clear from the very first day Wren Calloway came to live under her roof. A girl with Luna blood was a liability. A girl with no wolf was invisible. And invisible, Mildred had decided, was the only version of Wren she could tolerate. So Wren learned to disappear. She hid the way the moon pulled at her bones every time it rose full and swollen over the Oregon pines. She hid the trembling that started in her hands when she was angry, the silver that flashed behind her eyes when she was afraid. She told the pack healers she had skipped the shift. She told anyone who asked that her wolf had simply never come. A defect, a skip in the bloodline. Nothing to see here. For 23 years, she was nothing. Until the night Alpha Evander Ashcroft of the Ashcroft Forest Pack rode into Harrow's Creek, cold, quiet, and unmovable, and demanded a Luna. And Mildred Calloway, terrified he would take her own daughter, handed him the girl she had never wanted. Wren did not cry. She did not beg. She said yes before Mildred even finished the sentence, because the only thing worse than being handed to a stranger was spending one more day in that house, swallowing herself whole to keep the peace. Whatever waited for her at Ashcroft Manor, whatever cold, reclusive alpha lived in that forest mansion, it could not be worse than this. She would marry him. She would be his Luna. And she would do it with everything she had been saving up for 23 years. The night Evander Ashcroft came to Harrow's Creek, the pines went still. That was how Wren noticed him first. Not with her eyes, but with the sudden silence outside her window. The wind that had been threading through the forest all evening simply stopped, as though the trees themselves had drawn a collective breath. She crossed to the glass and pressed her fingertips against it. Below, a black vehicle had pulled up to the edge of their gravel drive. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered. He wore dark clothing with no embellishment, no sign of rank. Nothing that announced him except the way he moved. Deliberate, unhurried. Like a man who had never once needed to prove a thing. He looked up. Wren stepped back from the window. She had heard of Evander Ashcroft, the way everyone in the Pacific Northwest Pack territories had heard of him. He ran the oldest forest territory in Oregon, a vast stretch of old-growth land surrounding a manor that no one outside his inner circle had ever entered. He had no known mate, no close allies, no taste for politics. He attended summit meetings when law required it and left the moment courtesy permitted. The other alphas called him the ghost of the tree line. What they did not say out loud, but what everyone knew, was that his pack was powerful, quietly, immovably powerful. Whatever Evander Ashcroft was doing alone in that forest, it worked. Wren heard her aunt's voice carry up the stairs, low and tight with the particular kind of fear Mildred never admitted to. She dressed quickly, not because she had been summoned, because she already knew. The sitting room felt smaller with him in it. Evander stood near the fireplace, not touching anything, not sitting, not making himself comfortable in any of the ways guests usually did. His arms were at his sides. His dark eyes moved slowly across the room, cataloguing it the way Wren imagined a cartographer might, noting distances, exits, the quality of the walls. His hair was dark, cut close at the sides and slightly longer at the crown. His jaw was clean-shaved and strong. He was, by any measure, extraordinary to look at. Wren noticed that the way she noticed a storm coming, something she would need to account for. Mildred was talking. She had been talking since Wren appeared in the doorway, filling the silence with a nervous river of words about pack history and family loyalty and the honor of his visit. And Evander was listening to none of it. His gaze had found Wren the moment she walked in. It stayed there. "This is my niece," Mildred said, and the word niece came out with the faint sourness it always carried in her aunt's mouth. "Wren, she's 23. She doesn't have a wolf." Wren stood very still. "She's from your late sister's line," Evander said. His voice was low and even, not unkind, not warm. "Yes." Mildred's hands moved to her skirt, smoothing it. "But as I said, the gift didn't pass to her. She's perfectly ordinary." Something shifted in Evander's expression. It was small, barely a change at all. But Wren caught it. His eyes moved down and up, taking a full measure of her. She had the distinct sensation that he was not looking at what her aunt had just described. "I see," he said. He looked at Mildred. "She'll do." No one asked Wren. That was the part that should have made her furious, and in a distant, observational way, she supposed it did. She was 23 years old, and she was being discussed like furniture, like something to be assessed for usefulness and carried out. But fury required a kind of safety she had never had in this house. So instead, Wren stood in the center of the room while the adults spoke around her, and she thought very carefully about what she wanted. She wanted out. She wanted so badly to be out of this house, out from under Mildred's watchful, resentful eye, out from Corinne's lazy cruelties and the pack's collective assumption that she was less. She wanted space. She wanted sky. She wanted to stop swallowing herself every single morning just to get through the day. A cold, reclusive alpha in a forest mansion was a risk, but it was a risk with a different horizon than the one she had been staring at her whole life. When Mildred finally turned to her and said, "You understand you'll go with him, Wren. This is what's best for the family," the careful cruelty of framing her disposal as a gift, Wren simply nodded. "I'll need to pack," she said. Her voice was steady. It was the calmest she had ever sounded in that house. Across the room, Evander Ashcroft watched her, and whatever lived behind those dark eyes, it was paying very close attention. That night, as Wren packed the small bag that held everything she owned worth keeping, she heard her cousin Corinne in the hallway. "You know he's going to find out," Corinne said through the door, not bothering to lower her voice. "When he finds out you have nothing, he'll send you back. And then what?" Wren folded her mother's photograph carefully between two shirts. "Then I'll figure out what comes next," she said. She clicked the bag shut. She had no idea what was going to happen to her. But she was, for the first time in longer than she could remember, not afraid of the answer. The drive to Ashcroft Manor took 40 minutes. Wren spent most of it watching the town of Harrows Creek give way to unincorporated forest. The kind of forest that had never been touched, that had been old when the settlers arrived, and would be old long after everything they built had returned to soil. The road narrowed, the trees closed in, the sky, what was visible of it, turned from the pale purple of late evening to a deep, seamless black, threaded with stars. Evander did not speak. Wren did not mind. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and breathed slowly, feeling the forest reach her the way it always did, like something calling her name in a frequency only she could hear. Her wolf, the wolf she had spent years convincing everyone she didn't have, stirred in her chest like a sleeper roused by a familiar sound. She pressed her hand flat against her sternum. "Easy," she told it. "Not yet." The manor appeared around a curve in the road, and it was not what she had expected. She had expected something imposing, something with the careful grandeur of old money. Columns, perhaps, or iron gates, or the deliberate architecture of a man who needed to remind visitors of his power. What she found was something older. The stone was dark and weathered, covered in the kind of ivy that had been growing for a century. The windows were tall and unlit, except for a warm glow from the ground floor. The trees grew right up to the edges of the building, their roots lifting slightly from the earth, as though the forest had tried to reclaim the structure and then changed its mind, deciding instead to hold it. It looked, Wren thought, like a place that had made its peace with belonging to the land. She loved it immediately. Inside, the manor was warm, not in the performed way of houses trying to appear welcoming, not cut flowers in vases or candles placed for effect. Warm, the way a house got when it was genuinely lived in by someone who had learned, over years, what they actually needed. Books everywhere, stacked on surfaces and arranged on built-in shelves that ran floor to ceiling in the main hall. A fireplace that was clearly used. Furniture that was good quality and slightly worn, the kind that got that way from use rather than neglect. A woman named Clea, who managed the household, showed Wren to a room on the second floor. It had a window seat that looked directly into the tree line. The bed was large, made with clean linen that smelled of cedar and something faintly green. "The Alpha's room is at the end of the hall," Clea said, without any particular emphasis. "He keeps different hours. He's usually in the study past midnight, up before dawn. He'll tell you himself what he prefers." "Does he talk much?" Wren asked. Clea paused in the doorway and gave her a look that was either sympathy or amusement, possibly both. "He talks when something needs saying." After she left, Wren stood in the center of her new room and looked around at it. Hers. This space was hers. She sat down on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands together and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, a sensation that crept up from somewhere below her ribs and took up cautious residence in her chest. Something like hope. The wedding was simple. A pack elder conducted it in the main hall 3 days later, with only Clea and 2 of Evander's senior wolves as witnesses. Wren wore the nicest thing she owned, a dress the color of deep sage green, simple, long-sleeved. Nothing that could be called bridal except for the way she had done her hair. Evander wore dark clothing, as she was beginning to understand he always did. He repeated the words the elder gave him without inflection, but he looked at her while he said them, which she had not expected. His gaze was direct, and she held it, and somewhere in the middle of the vow, something about choosing and keeping, she felt her wolf rise in her chest like a tide. When it was done, the elder pressed their wrists together briefly in the old way, and Wren felt it. A warmth, a pull, faint like the very first thread of something enormous. She kept her expression neutral. She was very good at that, but her heart was hammering so loudly she was certain every werewolf in the room could hear it. Evander looked down at their joined hands. His thumb moved once across her wrist. So briefly it might have been an accident. It was not an accident. She was almost certain it was not an accident. "Welcome to the Ashcroft pack," he said quietly. Just for her. Wren looked up at the man she had just married. Cold, they said, reclusive, they said, keep your distance. And decided quietly and with her whole heart that she was going to love him so well it would rewrite everything anyone had ever said about him. Starting now. She found him in the study that first night, long after the elder had gone and Clea had said goodnight. She stood in the doorway, and he looked up from whatever he was reading, and they regarded each other for a moment in the particular quiet of a house settling into darkness. "I wanted to say goodnight," she said. He nodded. She should have left. She stayed. "Why a Luna?" she asked. "Why now?" He looked at her for a long moment, as though deciding how much to give. "The pack has been without one for 8 years," he said. "There are things a Luna provides that an Alpha can't give alone. Balance. A different kind of presence. And you came to Harrow's Creek specifically." "Yes," she filed that away. "Good night, then." "Good night, Wren." She walked back up the stairs, and she could feel his gaze following her until she turned the corner, and her wolf pressed warm against her ribs, and she told it, firmly, with absolute affection, to be patient. The books, Wren discovered, were organized by a system only Evander understood. She spent her first full morning in the manor's main study trying to decode it. Not by subject, not by author, not alphabetically. There was something else at work, some thread of association that connected a field guide to Oregon mycology, to a worn collection of Neruda, to a technical manual on old-growth forest ecology, all shelved together on the same row. She stood in front of that particular shelf for several minutes, tilting her head, trying to find the logic. "The mushrooms grow beneath the trees Neruda wrote about," said a voice from the doorway. "The ecology text explains why the root systems allow it." She turned. Evander was leaning against the doorframe, a cup of something in one hand. He looked at her the way he always seemed to look at her, measuring, unhurried, like she was a phenomenon he was trying to classify. "That is genuinely beautiful," she told him. He blinked, as though compliments were a weather event he hadn't prepared for. "You can borrow anything," he said. "Just put it back where it was." He turned to leave. "Evander—" He stopped. Wren crossed the room, reached past him to the small table near the door, where he had set his cup while apparently thinking about leaving, and handed it back to him. Their fingers did not quite touch. "Thank you," she said. "For the room. For this." She gestured vaguely at the study, the manor, the entire improbable situation. "I know this wasn't exactly planned." He looked at the cup in his hand, then at her. "Neither of us planned it." "No, but I want you to know." She stopped herself, then decided to keep going, because she had spent 23 years stopping herself, and she was done with that. "I want you to know that I'm going to try, really try, not because I have to, because I want to." Something moved across his face. It was gone before she could name it. "All right," he said. He left. Wren turned back to the mismatched, beautiful, inexplicable bookshelf and smiled at it. She learned him in increments. He read every evening, always in the same armchair near the east window of the study, a lamp tilted at exactly the right angle. He drank his coffee black and made it himself every morning at 5:45, before anyone else was awake. He walked the perimeter of the property at dusk, a territorial instinct, she suspected, though he would have called it a habit. He was meticulously fair to everyone on his land, and slightly warmer to the ones who worked hardest. He had a greenhouse behind the manor, hidden by the curve of the building, full of herbs and several varieties of orchid, and when he was in there, he moved differently. Careful, deliberate, unhurried in a way that was almost tender. He did not speak much. But what he said was always precise, and it was never cruel, and she noticed after 2 weeks that he had not once said anything designed to diminish her. In Mildred's house that had been remarkable. In anyone's house, it was remarkable. She started finding him, not obviously, not in a way that could be called pursuit. She simply developed an orbit around his schedule. She would be reading when he came to read, already settled in the window seat across from his chair, feet tucked under her. She would wander into the greenhouse in the evenings, ostensibly curious about the orchids, and find herself learning their names while he worked nearby. She started asking questions, small ones, then larger ones. She discovered that he had answers for almost everything, and gave them freely when asked, as though he had simply been waiting for someone to wonder. One evening she looked up from her book and found him watching her. He looked away immediately. But not before she saw it. Something careful and startled, like a person who had reached for a door in the dark and found it already open. She tucked that away and said nothing. She was patient. She had learned patience the hard way. But inside her chest, her wolf was already certain. It was a Tuesday when she kissed him. She had not planned it. She had not, strictly speaking, planned most of the things she had done since arriving at Ashcroft Manor, because planning implied the kind of careful restraint she was rapidly running out of, and her wolf, repressed, hungry, full of 23 years of things she had never been allowed to be, had opinions about Evander Ashcroft that were becoming louder by the day. He was reading. She had been pretending to read, which in practice meant watching his face move through whatever emotion the text produced. A slight tightening around the eyes for tension, a small exhale for release, the occasional microscopic lift at the corner of his mouth that she had decided to catalogue as a form of joy. She got up. She crossed the room. She sat on the arm of his chair, and before he could do more than glance up in mild surprise, she leaned down and pressed her mouth to his. He went very still. She pulled back an inch, met his eyes. "Sorry," she said. "I've been wanting to do that for 11 days." A beat of silence. 11 days, he repeated. "I've been counting." He looked at her for a long moment. The book was still open in his hands. His expression was completely unreadable, and then very gradually it was not, because something moved through it. Slow, warm, like sunlight reaching the bottom of deep water. He set the book aside. "Then don't apologize," he said. She had been half afraid that the moment would be strange afterward, that the careful equilibrium of their days would shift into something awkward. But when she came downstairs the following morning at 5:44, the coffee was already brewing, and Evander was standing at the window with his back to her. And when he turned at her footstep, he simply handed her a cup and said, "The jay was back this morning. It left something on the windowsill." She went to look. A small piece of bark, shiny, an offering or an observation or some complex bird communication she would never fully decode. She drank her coffee and looked at the bark and felt the morning hold them, unhurried, exactly right. She rearranged his mornings. Not deliberately. It began by accident, the first time she was awake at 5:44 and slipped into the kitchen and made the coffee herself, getting the ratio wrong but having it ready by the time he appeared in the doorway. He had looked at the cup she offered with the expression of a man trying to work out the logic of something unexpected. He drank it. He didn't say it was wrong, even though she knew it was. After that, she got up at 5:43. By the end of the third week, she had the ratio right, and he was making 2 cups without being asked, and they stood together in the kitchen in the grey half-light before dawn, not speaking, the forest pressing its dark quiet against the windows. It was, Wren thought, the most peaceful thing she had ever done. He started leaving books on the window seat. Not with a note, not with any comment. She would come downstairs and find one placed with its cover up, as though it had simply appeared there. Novels mostly. Also once, a guide to Pacific Northwest bird species, which made her laugh out loud when she opened it and found a sticky note tucked inside. "The one in the pine outside your window is a Steller's jay." She had started saying good morning to it. The courtship, such as it was, looked nothing like the ones in the stories she had read in Mildred's house, the breathless alpha claimsmate tales that circulated through pack culture like folklore. There was no grand declaration, no sweeping gesture. There was coffee at 5:43 and books left without explanation, and the particular quality of his attention, which was total and quiet and more overwhelming than anything she had ever experienced. She had decided to love him. That had been a choice, but the way it actually felt, the way her chest opened up whenever he walked into a room, the way her wolf went calm and certain in his presence, the way she had started, without quite realizing it, constructing a future in her mind that contained him at every turn. That was not a choice. That was something else entirely. That was the mate bond threading into place. She was 90% certain he felt it too. She was also 90% certain he was trying not to. She was in the greenhouse when he found her. She'd been attempting, with limited success, to repot one of his orchids according to a set of instructions she'd found in a reference book, and she was elbow-deep in potting medium and losing the argument when she heard the door. "You're doing it wrong," Evander said. "I know," she said cheerfully. "I was hoping you'd come fix it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he set down whatever he'd been carrying and came to stand beside her. He did not take over. He moved behind her, reached around and guided her hands, not correcting so much as adjusting, showing rather than telling, his chest warm against her back. "Like this," he said quietly. "The roots need room to spread, but the medium needs to hold them. You're not repotting, you're giving it a foundation." Wren went very still. "A foundation," she repeated. "Something stable, so it can grow the way it's supposed to." He paused. "Plants do better when they know where they stand." She turned her head slightly. He was close. Close enough that she could see the slight tension along his jaw, the way he was very carefully not meeting her eyes. "Evander. Are we still talking about the orchid?" A beat. 2. "I don't know," he said. She turned fully, potting medium still on her hands, and looked at him. He looked back, and for once the careful distance in his expression was not quite there. Something underneath it was visible, raw and uncertain and real. "I know what this is," she said quietly. "I've known for a while. I think you have too." His jaw moved. "Wren, I'm not asking you to say anything. I'm not asking for anything." She held his gaze. "I just want you to have it, the truth of it. Because keeping things to myself has never made me anything except smaller, and I am done being small." He looked at her for a long, searching moment. Then slowly, he raised one hand and pressed it flat against her jaw. Careful, deliberate, like someone handling something they did not want to break. "You're very stubborn," he said. Ferociously, she agreed. And for the first time since she had known him, Evander Ashcroft smiled. Not a micro-expression, not a ghost. A real, unguarded, completely helpless smile, like a man who had been holding a door shut for a very long time and had finally run out of reasons. Wren felt it in her bones. Her wolf sang. She planned the picnic for a Thursday, which she had identified as the day he had no meetings, no boundary walks, nothing on the schedule that could not be postponed. She spent the afternoon in the kitchen with Clear's bemused assistance, assembling a basket that contained good bread, good cheese, the specific kind of dark chocolate she had noticed him unwrapping in the evenings, a thermos of proper coffee, and 2 wool blankets because it was Oregon in the fall and she was not foolish. She found him in the study at dusk, reading. "Come with me," she said. He looked up. "Where?" "Outside. There's a full moon tonight." She held up the basket. "I made a picnic." He looked at the basket. He looked at her. Something complicated moved through his expression. "Wren," he said carefully, "you don't have to do all of this." "I know I don't have to." She held his gaze. "I want to. We can take this slowly. There's no need to..." "Evander." She put the basket down on the edge of his desk, walked around to where he was sitting, and looked at him directly. "I'm not doing this because I think I have to impress you. I'm not performing. I'm not trying to earn something," she exhaled. "I'm happy. I am genuinely, actually happy, and I want to eat good cheese under a full moon with you because that sounds like exactly the right thing to do on a Thursday evening. That's all." He was very still. "You're happy," he said. "Yes. Here. In this house. With..." He stopped. "With you," she finished. "Yes." He closed the book. He stood up. He followed her out into the dark. The clearing behind the east wing of the manor had been Wren's favorite discovery of her first month there. It was a natural break in the trees, circular, carpeted in the kind of soft ground cover that grew only where old roots had once been. The forest made a frame around it. The sky overhead was open and wide, and on a clear October night like this one, the full moon hung in it like a lantern lit specifically for the occasion. Wren spread both blankets and opened the basket while Evander stood at the edge of the clearing, looking up. She watched him watch the moon. Something was happening in his face that she had not seen before, a loosening, a letting go. The careful composure he wore like a second layer of clothing was still present, but underneath it something was surfacing. Something older, quieter, and very much awake. "Come sit with me," she said. He came. They ate the bread and the cheese and the good dark chocolate, and they drank coffee from the thermos, and the moon moved slowly overhead, and Wren talked. She told him about growing up in Mildred's house, not the worst of it. She was not ready to give him the worst of it yet, but the small daily inventory of careful erasure. The things she had learned not to say. The person she had learned to be, which was smaller and quieter than the one that lived inside her. He listened. He did not offer comfort prematurely, or say the things people said when they were uncomfortable with someone else's pain. He just listened, which was rarer and more valuable than most people understood. "I used to come out at night," she said. "When I was 17, 18, the forest near my aunt's house, I would walk and I could be bigger, inside myself, like the forest made space for the part of me that had no room in that house." She looked at the moon. "I know that sounds strange." "It doesn't," he said. She looked at him. "The forest gives things room," he said. "That's what it does. It doesn't judge the size of what lives in it." He paused. "You should not have had to go to it to find that." Wren was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "I shouldn't have." The moon climbed higher. The night made everything intimate. The warmth of the blanket, the smallness of their circle of light, the vast dark forest holding them gently in its perimeter. "Evander," she said. He looked at her. "I'm in love with you." She said it the way she had learned to say the true things, simply, clearly, without decoration, so there could be no mistake about what she meant. He went very still. "I know we've only been married a month," she continued. "I know this is fast. I know you are a careful person by nature, and that you do not give things out easily. I'm not asking you to match me right now. I just..." She exhaled. "I want you to have it, the truth of it. Because keeping things to myself has never made me anything except smaller, and I am done being small." The night held its breath. Evander turned to look at her fully, and what was in his face was something she had never expected. Not alarm, not discomfort, not the cool distance he could produce with such precision when he chose. What was in his face was something raw and unguarded, and she realized with a start, a little undone. He reached out. His hand found hers in the dark, and he held it carefully, the way he handled the orchids, like something living that deserved to be treated exactly right. "Wren," he said. Her name in his voice was different from how anyone else had ever said it. "I have been trying to understand what you are to me since the night I walked into that house and saw you standing in the doorway. And I think..." He stopped. Then, "I think the forest recognized you before I did." She stared at him. He shifted, closed the distance between them on the blanket, and this time when he kissed her it was nothing like the quick, surprised moment in the study. It was deliberate and deep and warm, and his hands came up to hold her face with the same gentleness he used for everything he cared about. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I think," he said quietly, "that I have been in love with you since you handed me my coffee cup and thanked me for a room in my own house." Wren laughed, soft and helpless. and his arms came around her. Above them, the full moon held them in its light. And what had begun, tentative, careful, extraordinary, became complete. The days after the picnic were different, not dramatically. Evander was still Evander, still quiet, still precise, still given to spending entire evenings in the study with a book while she arranged herself in his orbit like a small, affectionate satellite. But something had loosened at the center of things, some held tension had released, and in its place was something warmer. He touched her more. Small things. A hand at the small of her back when she came into a room, fingers brushing hers when he handed her a cup. A kiss pressed briefly to the top of her head when he passed her in the hall. Not performed, not careful. Natural, like breathing. She loved it. Her wolf loved it even more. Her wolf was becoming a problem. She had managed the suppression for years through sheer discipline, a constant internal pressure like holding a tide back with your hands. But here, in this place, with this man and the mate bond singing between them and the forest pressing its ancient energy against every window, the effort was becoming something she could not sustain. Her wolf was not dangerous. It was simply no longer interested in hiding. She started waking before him, which she had not done before. She started moving faster. She dreamed of running, of paws on wet earth, of the particular freedom she had denied herself for so long that it had become a kind of ache. One morning she came downstairs and found Evander in the kitchen, coffee made, looking at her with the expression he wore when he was paying close attention. "You haven't been sleeping well," he said. "I've been sleeping fine. You've been up before me. That's not fine, that's before dawn." He set a cup in front of her. "What's wrong?" She wrapped her hands around the warmth, looked at the steam rising from it, considered telling him half of the truth, then decided she was done with half-truths entirely. "I've been hiding something from you," she said. He waited. "My wolf didn't skip the bloodline." She looked up. "I've had her my entire life. I've been hiding her since I was 16 because my aunt, because being a Luna in that house meant..." She stopped, started again. "She gave me to you partly because she thought you'd find out the truth," and she couldn't finish the sentence. It was too ugly. Evander was very quiet. Then, "She thought I would harm you when I found out." Not a question. He had already reasoned it. Yes. He set his own cup down. He came around the counter and he stood in front of her, and he looked at her with an expression that was not anger, not at her, and very carefully put both hands on her shoulders. "No one," he said, "is going to harm you. Not here, not ever." She believed him. That was the extraordinary thing. She simply, completely believed him. "Your wolf," he said. "When did she last run free?" Ren thought about it. 7 years. When I was 16. She exhaled. 7 years. Something moved across Evander's face that was quiet and fierce and deeply unhappy. "That ends today," he said. He took her to the deep forest. Not the managed perimeter walk he did every evening. Deep in, where the trees were old enough to have personal histories, where the light came through in columns and the ground was soft with centuries of accumulated growth. He moved through it easily. She watched him and understood for the first time that this was where he was most himself, not the manner, not the meetings, not the role. Here, in the old trees. "No one will see," he said. "No one comes this far in. The pack knows this territory is mine." She understood what he was offering. She turned to face him. The morning light came through the trees and touched his face, and she thought, not for the first time, that she had been extraordinarily lucky in the direction her aunt's cruelty had pointed her. "You're not afraid of what you'll see?" she asked. "When she comes out?" He looked at her steadily. "I've been afraid of very few things in my life. What I feel when I look at you is not among them." Ren took a breath. She let go. The shift came over her like a tide being released, not violent, not the way she had feared it would be after so long, but smooth and clean, like something returning to its rightful shape. When it was done, she stood in the deep forest on 4 paws, silver-white, smaller than she expected, but completely, entirely herself. She looked up at Evander. He was watching her with an expression she would have given anything to photograph. Not surprise, not even wonder, but something quieter and deeper than both. Recognition. "There she is," he said softly. And Ren ran. He was teaching her. They began early every morning, before the rest of the household stirred, Evander and Ren in the deep forest, working through the control she had never been given, learning to shift at will rather than by suppression, to hold the wolf and the woman simultaneously, to find the balance that every lunar bloodline was born for and that had been stolen from her by fear and circumstance. He was a patient teacher, exacting but patient. The kind of teacher who corrected precisely and without cruelty, who told her what was wrong and then stood quietly while she worked out how to fix it, who noticed improvement and acknowledged it briefly and meant it. She was a quick student, quicker than either of them had expected. "Your bloodline is strong," he said one morning, watching her shift between forms without the pause that had characterized her first efforts. "You should have had someone working with you a decade ago." "I know." She shook out her hair, human again, laughing slightly at the effort. "My aunt used to say wolves like me were dangerous, uncontrolled." Evander looked at her. She was wrong. "I know that now." He came to stand in front of her and took her chin in his hand, tilting her face up. His thumb moved across her cheekbone. "She was afraid of you," he said quietly. "Small people are always afraid of something larger than themselves. It had nothing to do with your nature." Ren covered his hand with hers. "You are," she told him, "very occasionally, extremely poetic." "I read a great deal," he said, with absolute seriousness, and she laughed again, and he watched her laugh with the expression he wore when he thought she wasn't looking. Open, helpless, a man who had no defenses left against her and had apparently decided he didn't need them. It was the beta, Gavin, who heard it first. He came to the manor mid-morning on a Wednesday, which was not his usual day, and found Evander in the study and spoke to him in the quiet voice used for things that required care. Ren was in the greenhouse. She was close enough to hear. Her hearing was sharper now with the suppression lifted, but she waited. She heard the name, Borak Sen. Her hands went still on the orchid she was repotting. Borak Sen was the alpha of the Sen Ridge Pack, her aunt's pack, the one that encompassed Harrow's Creek and the surrounding territory. He was known for 3 things: his efficiency, his ambition, and the extraordinary number of mates he had claimed over the years. 4, at last count, always Lunas, always women with specific gifts. The more powerful the Luna, the more insistent his claim. She heard Gavin say, "He knows," about her shift, about the training. He sent a formal communication. He wants the Luna returned to Sen Ridge territory for verification of her status. She heard Evander say nothing for a long moment. Then, "Thank you, Gavin." Then the study door opened and closed. Ren put the orchid down. She walked, carefully, steadily, out of the greenhouse and into the study, where Evander was standing at the window, looking out at the trees, and turned when she came in. He did not look surprised to see her. "You heard," he said. "Some of it." She crossed her arms, not in defense but in steadiness. "Borak Sen wants me back. He's claiming jurisdiction based on your birth pack. He has no claim. I'm mated. I'm a member of this pack now. He's going to contest it." Evander's voice was completely even. "He does this. He identifies powerful Lunas, and he finds reasons to claim them, and he has enough political standing that other alphas have historically—" He stopped. "Stepped aside," Ren finished. The word sat in the room like a stone. Wren looked at her husband. Evander was looking at the trees, and his jaw was tight, and she recognized the look. The one he wore when he was containing something large. Evander. He looked at her. "What are you thinking?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "I'm thinking that there is no version of this in which I allow anyone to take you anywhere." She held his gaze. "I am also thinking," he continued very quietly, "that you are not a resource to be relocated. You are not a diplomatic concession. You are my wife and my Luna and—" His voice dropped. "And the only person who has ever made me understand what that bond is supposed to feel like." Wren's throat tightened. Outside, the old forest held its breath. Something was coming, but she was no longer the girl who had spent 23 years with nowhere to stand. She was right here, and she was not going anywhere. The official communication from the Sen Ridge Pack arrived the following morning. It was worded carefully, the language of territorial law and bloodline rights, which were among the oldest instruments in pack governance. In the old structure, a woman born within a pack's territory could be called back if her status had been materially misrepresented to a claiming alpha. Borak Sen was arguing that Evander had claimed a mate on the basis of incomplete information, specifically that Wren's lunar nature had been concealed, and that had the full picture been available, the arrangement might have proceeded differently. The implication was clear. If the claiming alpha might not have chosen her, the claim was potentially voidable. Evander read it at the kitchen table while Wren stood at the counter with her coffee. She watched his face go through a short, controlled sequence of expressions and arrive at something very still. "He's saying you might not have wanted me if you'd known the truth," she said. "Yes. Which is the opposite of the truth?" "Which is the opposite of the truth?" He set the letter down. He's also arguing that the concealment constitutes a breach of the mating compact. Does it? Under the old law, technically, a material misrepresentation by the presenting party. Evander. She put her cup down. Does it, legally? Does it give him grounds? He looked at her directly. It gives him argument. That is not the same as grounds, but argument is what he'll use to open the case, and opening the case is the point. He leaned back. Borak Sen does not need to win legally. He needs to create enough procedural noise that it becomes simpler for me to release the claim than to defend it. That's how he's done this before. The other alphas gave in, Wren said. They chose the path of least disruption. She looked at the letter on the table. What do you need from me? He looked at her. Something flickered in his face. Not surprise exactly, but something like it. She realized he had expected to manage this around her, shield her from it. The reclusive alpha in his fortress, doing what he always did, handling things alone. What do you need from me? She repeated firmly. I am your Luna. This is my fight as much as yours. Tell me. After a long moment, he said, I need you to be willing to go before the Regional Alpha Council and speak for yourself. Done. Wren. He will try to diminish you. He'll use the concealment against you. He'll make the case that you deceived everyone, that your nature makes you unstable, that... Let him, she said. Let him stand up in front of a room full of alphas and try to explain why a woman hiding her wolf in a house where she wasn't safe should be punished for it. She looked at Evander steadily. I am not afraid of Borak Sen. Evander was quiet for a moment. Then, with a weight in his voice that had nothing to do with legal strategy, I should have gone to you, to find you specifically, that night. He paused. I should not have let it be Mildred's decision who stepped forward. Wren frowned. What do you mean? I knew, he said simply. Before I went to Harrow's Creek, I knew there was a Luna there. I had been told, the one she hid. His jaw tightened. I wanted to see for myself, to offer a choice, and instead I let your aunt make it into... what it was. The room was very quiet. "You came looking for me," Ren said. "I came looking for whoever needed to be found." She looked at the man across the table, this quiet, careful, extraordinary person who had walked into her aunt's sitting room and catalogued the room for exits, like someone who understood exactly what kind of house it was. "And you think that was wrong?" she said. "I think it could have been handled better." "Evander." She leaned across the table and covered his hand with hers. "I said yes before she finished the sentence." He looked at her hand on his. "I know," he said quietly. "So stop carrying what you couldn't control and help me get ready for a council meeting." She squeezed his hand once. "We have work to do." Outside, the pines moved in the wind. It was coming. But Ren Ashcroft had survived 23 years of being underestimated. She was not afraid of one more. The Ashcroft pack had not held a formal war council in 11 years. Evander called one now. They gathered in the great hall of the manor. Gavin, the Beta, broad and steady. Sarah, the pack's head elder, a woman of 60 who had known Evander since childhood and had opinions about everything. Marcus, the chief border guardian, young and precise. And 4 senior wolves who had been with the Ashcroft line for decades. Clea stood at the back, taking notes. Ren sat at Evander's right hand, which was not customary at Ashcroft gatherings, but which Evander had made a point of indicating was where she would be. No one argued. Sarah, whose opinions Ren had been told to brace for, simply looked at her with the measuring gaze of a woman who had seen a great many young lunar females and had catalogued them all, and then nodded once, as if something she had suspected had been confirmed. Afterward, Ren asked Gavin what the nod meant. "It means she thinks you'll do," he said. "Is that good?" From Sarah, he said, "That's extraordinary." The preparation took 3 days. Ren had expected strategy sessions, political briefings, the legal framework of the old council structure, and there was that, but there was also something she had not anticipated. The pack came to her. Not formally, not on schedule. They came in ones and twos, members of Evander's territory who had heard what was happening and arrived at the manor to offer something. Old records, witnesses who had been in Harrow's Creek, a woman who had once been courted for Borak Sen's collection of lunars and had found other means of escape. She was not alone. She had never, she realized, been alone since the moment she arrived here. She had simply been too accustomed to aloneness to recognize its absence. She was sitting in the study reviewing documents on the 4th evening when Evander came in, closed the door, and said, "Take a break. I'm almost done with this section. You've been at it for 6 hours." She looked up. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with the expression that meant he had been watching for longer than he'd announced. "Come read with me," he said. She put the documents down. They sat in their chairs, hers in the window seat, his in the armchair. And he read, and she tried to read, and after 20 minutes she set her book on her knees and simply watched him instead, the way she had from the beginning. "I'm not scared," she said to the room as much as to him. He glanced up. "About the council. I want you to know that." She held his gaze. "I know you've been worried about putting me in front of them, that you'd rather just handle it, without me having to—" She shook her head. "But I want to be there. I want to stand up and be seen. I've spent my whole life avoiding rooms like that." She paused. "I'd like to try a different approach." He looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said. "I also know that you don't need protecting." He set his book down. "That's not why I worry." "Then why?" "Because I have to stand next to you while someone tries to diminish you," he said quietly. "And I am not particularly good at standing still when that's happening." Ren stared at him. She got up from the window seat, crossed the room, and sat on the arm of his chair. "Then we'll hold each other still," she said. His hand found hers. Outside, the moon was rising. The council was held at neutral ground, a lodge in the mountains 2 hours north of Harrows Creek, in the kind of geography that had served as pack-meeting territory for as long as anyone could remember. Stone floors, high ceilings, the smell of pine resin and old wood. Wren walked in on Evander's arm and felt the room change when she entered it. Not because she was impressive by any external measure. She wore something clean and simple and dark, and she walked the way she had been learning to walk since her wolf had been free, without apology, without the practiced smallness of a girl who had needed to make herself invisible. She felt the mate bond between them like a thread pulled taut, alive, warm, steady. Borak Sen was already there. She saw him across the room before he saw her. He held himself like a person accustomed to taking up space. When he found her eyes, he smiled. A smile she recognized. She had seen it her whole life, on smaller stages, in smaller rooms. She looked back at him without expression and thought, "I have been underestimated by better people than you." Then she turned to find her seat. Evander's hand pressed briefly to the small of her back. There and gone, a single point of warmth. She sat down. The council began. Borak Sen spoke first. He was good at it. Wren would give him that. He had the practiced cadence of a man who had spent decades in rooms like this, who had learned exactly how much authority to let into his voice to make an argument sound like reason. He cited the old law with the facility of someone who had used it before. He described the Harrows Creek situation with careful sympathy, framing it as a systemic failure that had left the Ashcroft Alpha without full information at the time of mating. He was building toward a conclusion that would make Wren sound like a problem in need of resolution. She sat with her hands still in her lap and listened to every word. When it was her turn, she stood. "My name is Wren Ashcroft," she said, and let the name settle. "I was born Wren Calloway in the Sen Ridge Pack territory, to parents I lost when I was 3. I was raised by my aunt in Harrows Creek, and yes, I concealed my wolf." Silence. "I want to tell you why." She let her gaze move across the assembled council, not performing, not pleading, simply meeting eyes one by one. "I concealed my wolf because the adult responsible for my safety made it clear from the time I was old enough to understand that a girl with Luna blood was a liability in her household. Not because of anything I had done, not because of anything dangerous or unstable in my nature, but because..." She paused. "Because she understood what would happen to a young Luna female in a territory governed by an alpha whose collection of powerful mates has been publicly documented." The silence had a different quality now. "She was afraid," Wren continued. "Afraid enough that when Alpha Ashcroft came to her home, she offered me, without asking me, without explanation, because she would rather lose a niece she never claimed than risk her own daughter." She kept her voice steady. "I said yes. I'm not asking for your sympathy for that decision. I'm telling you that I made it with full awareness of my options, which were limited, but were mine." She straightened. "I am a Luna. I have always been a Luna. My wolf is not a revelation. She is simply no longer hidden. And the only reason she was ever hidden was because hiding was the only safety available to me." She looked at Borak Sen. "The old law protects bloodline integrity," she said. "It was written to prevent Lunas from being deceived or coerced into unsuitable bonds. I was not deceived. I was not coerced. The concealment was mine, undertaken to protect myself." She held his gaze. "The law does not exist to make it easier for powerful men to acquire powerful women. I will say that plainly, since no one else seems to want to." The room was very quiet. Borak's expression had shifted. The smooth confidence was still there, but underneath it, something had gone tight. "Furthermore," she said, turning from him to address the full council, "I would like to submit testimony from a former resident of Sen Ridge territory regarding the circumstances of Alpha Sen's previous mate selections. This testimony was gathered voluntarily and is fully documented." She looked at Gavin, who placed a folder on the council table. Burak Sen's jaw tightened. Sarah, the Ashcroft elder, leaned back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone watching a very good play reach its resolution. Evander did not move. He sat at Ren's side, still and present, and his hands rested perfectly, deliberately relaxed on the table in front of him, the effort of a man keeping his word about standing still. She looked at him for 1 second. His eyes met hers. In them, pride, warm and absolute. She turned back to the council and waited. The deliberation took 2 hours. Ren and Evander waited outside, on a stone terrace overlooking the mountain trees. She leaned against the railing. He stood beside her, close, his shoulder against hers. "You did well," he said. "We did well." He turned his head to look at her. "That was all you." The testimony was Gavin's. The documentation was Sarah's. The legal strategy was yours. She looked back at the trees. "I just stood up and said true things." "That," he said, "is the hardest thing there is." She considered that. "Then you really almost moved during the deliberation." "I really almost moved when he called the concealment fraudulent." "Yes." She turned to look at him fully. "Thank you," she said, "for staying still." He looked down at her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not needing me to do otherwise." They stood together in the thin mountain air, 2 wolves at the edge of the world, waiting. When the doors opened and Sarah appeared, her expression said everything before her words did. The council had ruled in favor of the Ashcroft mating bond. Ren exhaled, felt the long-held thing release. Evander's hand found the back of her neck, gentle and certain, and she turned into him and pressed her face against his chest and breathed him in, pine and warmth and the mate bond, steady and whole and entirely hers. "We should go home," he said against her hair. "Yes," she agreed, "we should go home." Winter came to Ashcroft Manor in the way winter came to the Pacific Northwest forests. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a slow and certain deepening. The light going amber and then thin, the trees going dark and wet, the air sharpening into something with edges. Ren loved it. She had always loved this season, the way it stripped things to their essentials. What was truly warm showed itself when everything cold pressed in from outside. What was truly solid held when the wind came through. The manor was warm. It had always been warm. She understood now that Evander had built it that way, not with money or design, but with the accumulated decisions of a person who knew what cold felt like and had spent a long time making space that didn't have it. She was in the greenhouse when he found her, 3 weeks after the council. She had taken over a section of it, his permission, offered before she could finish asking, in the way he gave things, simply, without making her feel the giving. She was growing herbs mostly, and something her mother had grown once in a photograph Ren had found among her aunt's papers, a small purple flowered thing whose name she was still trying to identify. "Lavender," Evander said from the doorway, looking at it. "It's not lavender. I know what lavender looks like. It's a cultivar called Hidcote. Smaller flowers, more compact. Your mother grew it?" He came in, and she moved slightly to make room, and he crouched beside the pot to look at it properly. She stared at him. "How do you know she grew it?" He glanced up. "Sarah knew your mother, not well, but she knew the family. I asked her after the council about your family." Something moved in Ren's throat. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, looking at the small, purple-flowered plant. Because I wanted to know where you came from, not Mildred's version of it. He looked up at her. You deserve to have someone ask. She sat down on the greenhouse floor in front of him, which was entirely undignified, and she didn't care at all. What did she say? That your mother was a remarkable Luna, that your father was a quiet man who loved two things, your mother and the outdoors, that they were very happy. He paused. That the accident that took them was nobody's fault. She had known most of this, but hearing it in his voice, knowing he had gone looking for it, was different. Sarah also said, he continued, that you are the most competent survivor she has encountered in 40 years of pack work, and that I am a great deal luckier than I deserve. Wren wiped her face with the back of her hand. I am going to thank Sarah extensively. She'll hate it. Good. He sat down on the greenhouse floor beside her, which was also undignified, and he was not a man who did undignified things for anyone. He sat there in his dark clothing on the dirt floor of the greenhouse and leaned his shoulder against hers, and she leaned back, and they sat like that for a long time among the herbs and the orchids and the small purple-flowered thing that had belonged to her mother. Evander, she said eventually, what were you doing alone in this forest before? She tilted her head against his shoulder. Everyone said you were reclusive, cold, that no one knew what you did here. He was quiet for a moment. Reading, he said. She laughed. Walking the land, he continued. Managing the territory, working in the greenhouse, corresponding with pack allies. He paused, being quiet. Were you unhappy? He thought about it. No, but I had learned to ask very little of the world. I had stopped looking for... He stopped. I had stopped expecting certain things. And now, he tilted his head against hers. Now, he said, I find I'm regularly surprised. They walked the boundary of the territory that afternoon, together for the first time. He showed her how he read the land. The marker trees, the old boundary stones, half buried in moss, the places where the property had been contested and resolved and grown. He showed her the springs that ran through the lower forest, the clearance where the pack held its seasonal ceremonies, the ridge where you could see on a clear day all the way to the coastal range. At the top of the ridge, she stopped. The light was failing. The sky above the mountains was the kind of color that existed only at this exact hour, this exact latitude, a deep, smoky blue at the zenith, going to coral and amber at the edges, the first stars appearing at the top. This is yours, she said, gesturing at the view. He came to stand beside her. Ours, he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the horizon, but his expression, open, certain, present in a way she associated with the forest and the greenhouse and the hour before dawn, was entirely unguarded. Ours, she agreed. Below them the old pines held the coming dark. The mate bond hummed its quiet certainty between them. And somewhere in the deep forest, two wolves ran together, silver white and dark, paws finding the same rhythm on the ancient ground, familiar with it now, belonging to it, home. The letter from Mildred arrived in January. Wren found it on the hall table, set there by Clea, without comment. It was hand-addressed in her aunt's precise, minimal handwriting. She stood in the hall with her coat still on and turned it over in her hands for a moment before opening it. It was not an apology. She had not expected one. It was 6 lines. The Sen Ridge Pack had imposed a territorial review following the council decision. Mildred's position in the pack hierarchy had been formally reduced. Borak Sen had released her from his inner council. Punishment for the unauthorized transfer of a Luna to another territory. The family was managing, she wrote, in the tone of someone who would rather not admit they were asking for anything. Wren folded the letter. She sat with it for a long time, alone in the study, and felt the full weight of it, not what Mildred wanted, but what it meant. The woman who had spent 23 years making her invisible had been made to account for it, not by Wren, not by Evander, but by the system she had tried to use. She was surprised to find she didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter, something tired and a little sad. And then, slowly, not because the past deserved it, but because she herself deserved to be free of its weight. Something like release. She was still sitting there when Evander came in. He saw her face and said nothing, which was one of the many things she had learned to love about him. He simply sat beside her and waited until she was ready to speak. "Mildred had consequences," she said. "Yes. I feel like I should feel something clear-cut about that, and you don't. It's complicated." She looked at the folded letter. "She was the only family I had. She was unkind to me in ways that shaped who I had to be to survive, and she is still the only family I had." She exhaled. "She's not a villain in a story. She's a frightened, limited person who didn't rise to what she was supposed to be." Wren shook her head. "That's sadder than a villain." Evander took the letter from her hands, set it on the table, and covered her hands with his. "What do you want to do with it?" She thought about it for a long moment. "I want to write back," she said. "I want to let her know that I'm well, that I'm not, that what she expected didn't happen, that I'm not asking her for anything and I'm not offering anything except the truth." She looked up at him. "Is that strange?" "No." He was quiet. "It's generous." "It's not for her," she said honestly. "It's for me. I want to put it down." He nodded. She wrote the letter that evening. 6 lines, more or less. She was well. She had found her place. She bore no malice. She wished Mildred a life with less fear in it. She did not sign it with love, because that would have been untrue, and she was done with untruths. She signed it with her full name, Wren Ashcroft. She put it in the outgoing mail and let it go. Spring came to the manor in the way spring came to old forests, not all at once, but in increments, each one deliberate. First the snowdrops, then the first green at the tips of the ferns, then a morning when Wren woke before Evander for the first time since autumn and lay in the grey half-light, listening to the birds, and felt, bone deep, settled. She had a meeting with Sarah that morning about the Pax Spring ceremony, which she had been quietly learning to lead. She had a training session in the afternoon with Marcus, honing the control she was still developing. She had plans to expand the greenhouse section, and a list of things she wanted to plant, and a book she was halfway through that she kept leaving on Evander's armchair so he'd find it and start it, because she wanted to talk with him about it. She had a life, a full, specific, hers-shaped life. She got up and made the coffee. She got the ratio exactly right. That evening, Evander found her in the clearing. She was sitting in the center of it on one of the old blankets, face tilted back, watching the sky. The moon was rising, not full tonight, waxing, 2 days from its fullest. She heard him before she saw him, recognizing his footstep the way she recognized everything about him now, completely, without effort, the way the body knows the things it has decided to keep. He sat beside her. "I want you to know—" He stopped, started again. "When I came to Harrow's Creek, I was not expecting to find what I found. I was not expecting you." He looked at the rising moon. "I want you to understand that I know what this has cost you. The hiding, the years before, everything you survived to arrive at a moment that should have been a choice and wasn't." He turned to her. "I want to give you what wasn't given." She waited. He reached into his jacket and held something out. A ring. Simple, dark metal, set with a single pale stone. Not a mating ring, not the formal kind. Something older. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it not because it was required of her, but because she chose to. She told my grandfather, 'A bond chosen freely is the only kind worth having.'" He looked at her steadily. I'm asking you to choose this, freely. Not because a frightened woman put you in a room with me, not because the mate bond pulled you toward me, but because you, Wren Calloway, Wren Ashcroft, want this life, want this forest, want you, she said. He was quiet. I want you, she said clearly and without decoration, the way she said every true thing. I chose you the night I said yes in that sitting room, and I would choose you again every morning if I had to. And I would choose you for no other reason than this, that you are the only place I have ever been that felt like mine. She looked at him. That's not the bond. That's me. The actual me. He looked at her for a long, searching moment. Then he took her hand and placed the ring on her finger, and it fit. Of course it fit. She laughed, and he pulled her in, and the forest held them both in the old way, making space for exactly the size of what had been brought into it. Above the tree line, the moon continued its climb. Somewhere below them, the Ashcroft territory stretched out in every direction, old and living and theirs, and two wolves ran together through the deepest part of it, leaving identical tracks in the soft spring earth, heading always toward the same horizon. There was no road back to the girl who had stood in her aunt's sitting room and swallowed herself down to nothing. There was only forward. There was only this. If Wren's story moved you, the girl who hid herself for 23 years and finally found the place where she was allowed to be everything, leave us a comment below. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and give this story a rating from 0 to 10. And if you want to know what happens next for Quinn and Cain, the pair whose story began in the shadows of this one, their full arc lives exclusively on the Alpha's Court members channel. The link is in the description. They've been waiting for you. Like this video if you want more stories where love doesn't ask you to be smaller than you are. Subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. We'll see you under the next full moon.